What's something people don't know about the ancient world? Welcome to Planet Pulse, where we dive deep into the mysteries of lost civilizations, ancient enigmas, and the secrets history tried to bury. If you're fascinated by the unexplained and the forgotten, you're in the right place. So, don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the unknown. History, we are told, is written by the victors. It's a convenient narrative that, implies the losers were simply less fit, less advanced, less worthy. But what if that isn't the whole story? What if the most profound and important chapters of our human story weren't just lost to time, but were deliberately and systematically erased? What if the survivors weren't the first, but merely the heirs to a world they didn't fully understand, a world that had been wiped almost clean by a catastrophe of unimaginable scale? We are not talking about a few scattered ruins or a handful of misplaced artifacts. We are talking about entire, highly sophisticated civilizations whose very existence fundamentally threatens the comfortable, linear timeline of human progress that mainstream archaeology has constructed and fiercely defends. These are not just lost cities, they are ghosts at the banquet of history, specters that whisper of a past far older, far more advanced, and far more mysterious than we have ever been led to believe. The evidence for their existence is mounting, and it is a direct challenge to the dogma that has held sway for generations. What you're about to hear is not speculation, it's the uncomfortable evidence that refuses to stay buried. It is a journey into the shadows of our collective memory, to the very dawn of what we call civilization, and to the cataclysm that nearly erased it all. We will look at the hard, physical proof on the ground, the data that academics would rather ignore, and we will ask the questions they are too afraid to answer. The story of our species is not a simple, gentle ascent from primitive hunter-gatherers to us. It is a story of great rises and devastating falls, and we are living in the shadow of a great forgetting. Deep in southeastern Anatolia, in modern-day Turkey, lies a place that simply should not exist according to the official story of our past. It's called Gobekli Tepe, the Potbelly Hill. For decades it was dismissed as nothing more than a medieval cemetery. But beneath the surface, something truly extraordinary was waiting. Something that would shatter the foundations of orthodox archaeology and force us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about our own origins. What was uncovered here was not a simple settlement. It was a vast megalithic temple complex, a series of massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing as much as 20 tons, arranged in intricate circular enclosures. These pillars are not crude blocks. They're elegantly carved with stunningly detailed reliefs of animals, foxes, boars, snakes, and menacing-looking vultures. This is high art, a sophisticated symbolic system from a people with a complex cosmology. A people who were, supposedly, nothing but primitive hunter-gatherers. The problem for the mainstream narrative is the age of this site. Through radiocarbon dating of organic materials found packed around the pillars, we know that Gobekli Tepe was built around 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. To put that into perspective, this is nearly 7,000 years before the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's 6,000 years before the invention of writing, 6,000 years before Stonehenge. This is a date that sits squarely in the Stone Age, a time when humanity was supposedly incapable of such grand architectural and organizational feats. According to the established timeline, complex society, religion, and monumental architecture were all consequences of the agricultural revolution, which began around 8,000 BC. People settled down, farmed the land, created surpluses, and only then did they have the time and resources to build temples. Gobekli Tepe turns this entire model on its head. Here we have a massive temple complex built by hunter-gatherers. It suggests that the drive to create, to worship, to come together for a shared spiritual purpose may have been the catalyst for civilization, not its result. The engineering skills required to build Gobekli Tepe are staggering. These enormous pillars were quarried from a nearby limestone outcrop, some more than a kilometer away. They were then transported somehow, and erected with incredible precision. How did a people without the wheel, without metal tools, without beasts of burden, achieve this? The official explanation is that it was done with manpower, flint tools, and ropes. But this explanation feels woefully inadequate when you stand before these monoliths and feel their immense weight and presence. What we see at Gobekli Tepe is not the work of a fledgling society taking its first clumsy steps. We see a level of sophistication, planning, and artistic expression that speaks of a long tradition. It's as though the builders arrived with the knowledge already fully formed. This isn't the beginning of the story of monumental construction. It feels like a chapter from the middle, or perhaps even the end, of a story whose earlier parts have been lost to us. Even more mystifying is what happened to Gobekli Tepe. Around 8000 BC, after more than 1,000 years of use, the entire site was deliberately and meticulously buried. The enclosures were filled with millions of cubic feet of earth, stone chippings, and animal bones. It was a monumental undertaking, perhaps requiring as much effort as its original construction. Why would a people go to such lengths to entomb their most sacred site? It's an act of deliberate concealment, an attempt to erase it from the landscape and from memory. Was this an act of piety, a ritual burial of a sacred place that had served its purpose? Or was it something else? Was it an attempt to hide it, to protect it from some impending catastrophe? The original excavator, Klaus Schmidt, believed it was buried by its own builders, but tragically, his work was cut short. His sudden death in 2014, followed by the suspicious death of his successor just a few years later, has only added to the mystery and fueled speculation about the suppression of what this site truly represents. The carvings on the pillars tell a story that Orthodox archaeology is reluctant to hear. One pillar, known as the Vulture Stone, has been interpreted by some researchers as a detailed astronomical map. It appears to depict a date, using constellations as they would have appeared in the sky thousands of years ago. That coincides precisely with the Younger Dryas impact event, a proposed cataclysmic comet strike around 10,900 BC that plunged the world back into Ice Age conditions. The stone seems to be a memorial, a record of a devastating global event. It suggests that the builders of Gobekli Tepe were not just advanced engineers, but also sophisticated astronomers, survivors of a cataclysm who were trying to preserve the memory of what happened. They were sending a message, a warning, down through the ages. A warning that mainstream science, with its rigid dogmas, refuses to heed. The implications are profound. If a society of astronomers and master builders existed 12,000 years ago, what does that say about the rest of the planet? Gobekli Tepe cannot have existed in a vacuum. It must have been part of a wider, interconnected world, a global civilization of which we have lost almost all trace. A civilization that was all but wiped out during the Younger Dryas, leaving only a few scattered remnants and a handful of traumatized survivors. The deliberate burial of the site feels like a desperate act by these survivors, an attempt to create a time capsule to ensure that their knowledge, their story, and their warning would not be lost forever. They buried it so that one day, a future civilization, ours, might uncover it and understand the truth of our shared, forgotten past. Gobekli Tepe is not just a temple. It is a ghost from a lost world, and it is calling out to us from across the abyss of time. The story doesn't end in the hills of Turkey. To find the next piece of this global puzzle, we must travel halfway around the world to Southeast Asia. Here, beneath the shallow waters of the Java Sea and the South China Sea, lies a ghost continent, a vast, sunken landmass that was once the heart of a powerful and sophisticated maritime empire. Geologists call it Sunderland. I believe it was the seat of a civilization that predates all others. Between 18,000 and 11,600 years ago, during the peak of the last ice age, global sea levels were as much as 120 meters, that's nearly 400 feet, lower than they are today. The islands we now know as Sumatra, Java, and Borneo were not islands at all. They were the mountain highlands of a single continuous landmass roughly twice the size of India. This was Sunderland, a tropical paradise of sprawling plains, mighty river systems, and a coastline stretching for thousands of miles. Mainstream archaeology has largely ignored this region in its search for the origins of civilization, focusing almost exclusively on the Fertile Crescent. This is a catastrophic error in judgment. They are looking for the origins of civilization on the land that exists today, forgetting that the geography of our world was radically different in the very period they claim to be studying. They are searching for the keys under the lamppost, not where they were actually lost. The evidence for an advanced civilization in this region is compelling and systematically ignored. All around the Pacific Rim, we find a legacy of astonishingly similar megalithic structures, myths, and cultural practices. From the pyramids of Indonesia, like Gunung Padang, to the underwater structures found off the coast of Japan, like Yonaguni, there is a clear architectural signature. A signature that points to a common source, a mother culture. Consider Gunung Padang in West Java. The official story is that it's a series of natural basalt columns on a hill, with a small megalithic site on top built a few thousand years ago. But core drilling conducted by a team of brave Indonesian geologists, led by Dr. Danny Hilman Natawijaja, has revealed a shocking truth. Beneath the surface lies a complex, multi-layered structure of chambers and walls, with the oldest layers dating back more than 20,000 years. This would make it the oldest pyramid on Earth, by a staggering margin. This is not a natural hill, it is a man-made pyramid, built and modified over millennia. And it is a direct threat to the established historical narrative. The reaction from the archaeological establishment has been predictable: denial, ridicule, and a concerted effort to shut down the research. The findings are too radical, too disruptive. They imply a high civilization was flourishing in Sunderland during the depths of the Ice Age. This was a maritime culture. Their world was the water. The people of Sunderland would have been master navigators, their ships plying the coasts of their vast continent and beyond. They would have possessed a deep and sophisticated knowledge of ocean currents, wind patterns, and celestial navigation, a knowledge that allowed them to map the world. We see echoes of this knowledge in ancient maps, like the Piri Reis map, which appear to show coastlines, such as Antarctica, free of ice, that were not officially discovered until centuries later. Where did this knowledge come from? It came from a seafaring civilization that had charted the globe long before the so-called Age of Discovery. A civilization whose home base was Sunderland. And when the ice caps began to melt at the end of the Ice Age, their world was slowly, inexorably drowned. The end came between 14,000 and 7,000 years ago. As meltwater from the great northern ice sheets poured into the ocean, sea levels rose relentlessly. It wasn't a single event, but a series of catastrophic pulses of sea level rise. Fertile coastal plains that had been home to millions were swallowed by the advancing tides. Cities, towns, and temples were submerged. An entire world was lost beneath the waves. The survivors of this cataclysm would have fled to higher ground, to the mountaintops that would become the islands of Indonesia and the Philippines, and to other coastlines around the world. They would have carried with them the memory of the deluge, the story of their drowned homeland. Is it any wonder that we find flood myths in virtually every culture on Earth? These are not just stories, they are the fragmented, traumatized memories of a real historical event. The evidence is all there, waiting to be properly investigated. Sonar scans of the seabed in the Sunda Shelf have revealed what appear to be submerged river channels, shorelines, and even potential man-made structures. But large-scale marine archaeology in this region is actively discouraged. It's expensive, it's politically sensitive, and most importantly, it threatens to uncover a history that the establishment has declared impossible. The suppression is systematic, discoveries are downplayed, funding is cut, and researchers who dare to challenge the orthodoxy are marginalized and their careers ruined. The existence of a great Ice Age maritime civilization in Southeast Asia would not just require a revision of a few chapters in our history books. It would require us to tear them up and start again. It would mean that the origins of civilization are not in the Middle East, but on a drowned continent at the other side of the world. This lost civilization of Sunderland is the missing link in our past. It is the mother culture that influenced Gobekli Tepe, that seeded ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, that left its mark all around the Pacific. We are the descendants of its survivors, suffering from a planetary amnesia about our true origins. The comfortable story of our slow, steady progress is a fantasy. The real story is one of catastrophe and survival, and the evidence lies just beneath the waves, waiting for us to find the courage to look. Our journey now takes us to the largest hot desert in the world, the Sahara. Today it is an ocean of sand, a place synonymous with desolation and emptiness, but it was not always this way. For thousands of years, during a period known as the African Humid Period, the Sahara was green. It was a vibrant living landscape of vast grasslands, deep lakes, and flowing rivers, and it was home to a great civilization that has been almost entirely forgotten. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have given us a god's-eye view of this lost world. Beneath the endless dunes, these technologies reveal the ghostly outlines of ancient riverbeds, the shorelines of enormous paleolakes, and something more. They show the distinct geometric patterns of what can only be described as settlements, the faint traces of towns and cities, laid out in complex networks, now buried under hundreds of feet of sand. This isn't speculation. In places like southern Libya in the Fezzan region, archaeologists have confirmed the existence of hundreds of fortified settlements belonging to a civilization known as the Garamantes. They flourished over 2,000 years ago, building sophisticated cities and developing an ingenious system of underground irrigation channels, or foggara, to tap into fossil water deep beneath the desert. But the Garamantes were latecomers. The evidence points to a much older, much more widespread occupation of the Sahara. The rock art scattered across the entire region tells the story. In caves and on cliffs in places like Tassili Najer in Algeria, we find thousands of stunningly beautiful paintings and engravings. The oldest of these, from the Roundhead period, are deeply strange and ethereal, dating back as far as 10,000 BC. They depict bizarre, otherworldly figures and complex ritual scenes. Then, the art changes. We see images of a lush green world teeming with life, giraffes, elephants, hippos, and vast herds of cattle. We see people herding livestock, hunting, and living in organized communities. This was the Green Sahara, a paradise that lasted for millennia, and it was during this time, from roughly 9,000 BC to 3,000 BC, that a great and original African civilization rose and fell. A civilization that was contemporary with Gobekli Tepe and the Maritime Empire of Sunderland. A civilization that has been conveniently written out of the official histories, which still stubbornly cling to a narrative of Egyptian and Mesopotamian primacy. The conventional view is that the Sahara was populated by scattered groups of nomadic cattle herders, but the evidence on the ground, and from space, suggests something far more substantial. The scale of the settlements, the sophistication of the rock art, and the presence of mysterious stone monuments, like the circular arrangement at Nabta Playa in southern Egypt, all point to a complex, organized society. Nabta Playa is particularly troubling for the mainstream view. Here, around 7000 BC, a cattle-herding people erected a complex and accurate astronomical observatory. A circle of small megaliths, with sight lines that align to the summer solstice and the rising of specific stars, including Orion. It predates Stonehenge by millennia. It demonstrates a deep scientific knowledge of the heavens within a supposedly primitive society. It's another piece of evidence that doesn't fit the approved timeline. What happened to this green Saharan civilization? The answer lies in climate change. Around 5,500 years ago, a subtle shift in the Earth's orbit caused the African monsoons to migrate south. The rains stopped, the rivers dried up, the lakes evaporated, and the grasslands withered and died. The green paradise transformed with terrifying speed into the hyper-arid desert we see today. This was a cataclysm for the people of the Sahara. Their world was destroyed. They were forced to flee, becoming climate refugees on a massive scale. Where did they go? The evidence strongly suggests they migrated towards the one reliable source of water that remained, the Nile Valley. They brought with them their knowledge, their cosmology, their astronomical skills, and their traditions of monumental building. This completely inverts the accepted story of ancient Egypt. The orthodox view is that Egyptian civilization developed in isolation in the Nile Valley, but the evidence from the Sahara suggests that dynastic Egypt was not a beginning, but a continuation. It was a legacy project, a rebirth of an older and greater Saharan civilization, founded by the survivors of a climate apocalypse. The pyramids, the temples, the obsession with the stars, it all has its roots not in the Nile Valley, but in the lost world of the Green Sahara. Why is this history so fiercely resisted? Because it challenges the deeply ingrained Eurocentric bias of 19th century archaeology, a bias that still echoes in academia today. It places the origins of one of the world's most celebrated ancient cultures firmly in the heart of Africa, among Black African peoples. It rewrites the history not just of Egypt, but of the world. There are political dimensions to this suppression as well. Many of the most promising sites are in politically unstable regions like Libya and Algeria, making research difficult and dangerous. But there is also a clear reluctance from the archaeological authorities, particularly in Egypt, to even consider this alternative model. The gift of the Nile narrative is too precious, too central to their national and academic identity, to be questioned. And so, the cities remain buried. The evidence is ignored. The rock art is dismissed as the primitive scrawlings of nomads. A vast and crucial chapter in the human story, the story of a great African civilization that rose and fell with the shifting climate, is allowed to remain hidden beneath the sand, another victim of our collective and carefully managed amnesia. Our final journey takes us to the shores of the Black Sea, a body of water that holds a dark secret in its depths, The story we are told is that the Black Sea has always been much as it is today, but in 1997, two highly respected marine geologists from Columbia University, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, published a theory that sent shockwaves through the scientific community, a theory of a deluge of almost biblical proportions. Using sonar data, sediment cores, and seismic profiling, Ryan and Pittman pieced together a dramatic story. They proposed that around 7,600 years ago, the Black Sea was not a sea at all. It was a small, isolated freshwater lake, sitting in a vast, dry basin, far below the level of the world's oceans. The land around this lake, a fertile plain, was inhabited. It was a cradle of early agriculture. At this time, global sea levels were rising rapidly as the last of the Ice Age glaciers melted. The Mediterranean Sea swelled, creeping ever higher, until it finally breached the narrow strip of land that we now call the Bosphorus Strait. What followed was a catastrophe of unimaginable violence. A waterfall 200 times more powerful than Niagara Falls began to pour from the Mediterranean into the Black Sea basin. The noise would have been deafening, a thunderous roar that could be heard for hundreds of miles. Every single day, more than 10 cubic miles of salt water cascaded into the basin, a torrent of destruction. The level of the lake began to rise by as much as 6 inches per day. The shoreline advanced inland by up to a mile each day. For the people living on those fertile plains, it would have been an apocalypse. Imagine their terror. The world they knew was being swallowed by a relentless, angry flood. They would have been forced to grab what they could and flee for higher ground, watching as their homes, their fields, and their sacred sites disappeared beneath the rising waters. This wasn't a slow, gradual process. It was a violent, traumatic event that would have been seared into the collective memory of the survivors for generations. Ryan and Pittman's research was initially celebrated. It was a stunning piece of geological detective work that provided a powerful scientific basis for the great flood myths found in cultures all across the Middle East and beyond, most famously, the story of Noah. It seemed for a moment that science and myth had found a dramatic point of convergence. The story of a lost world, drowned beneath the waves, was real. In 1999, a team led by explorer Robert Ballard, the man who found the Titanic, went to the Black Sea to test the theory. They used remotely operated vehicles to explore the ancient, submerged shoreline more than 300 feet below the current surface, and they found it, a perfectly preserved ancient landscape with riverbeds and sand dunes, and then they found the smoking gun, the remains of a wattle and daub structure, a human dwelling complete with carved wooden beams and stone tools. This was proof that people had lived there before the flood. Radiocarbon dating placed the settlement at around 7,500 years ago, right before the proposed date of the deluge. The discovery made headlines around the world. It seemed that a new, revolutionary chapter in our understanding of the past was about to be written. A chapter about a sophisticated Neolithic civilization, the potential wellspring of agriculture and settled life, that was wiped out in a single, cataclysmic event. And then, a strange silence fell. The initial excitement from the archaeological community quickly cooled. The findings were downplayed. Alternative, less dramatic theories were proposed. The dating of the flood was questioned. The significance of Ballard's discovery was minimized. The narrative was carefully managed and controlled, and the Black Sea Deluge theory was pushed to the fringes, labeled as sensationalist and unproven. Why? Why would such a groundbreaking and well-supported discovery be so thoroughly marginalized? Because, once again, it doesn't fit the comfortable linear model of the past. It speaks of catastrophe, not gradual change. It suggests that a pivotal civilization, a potential Garden of Eden for the agricultural revolution in Europe, was utterly destroyed. Its history, its innovations, its story, all drowned and erased. The implications are staggering. If the flood survivors fled, they would have spread out in all directions, into Europe, into Anatolia, into Mesopotamia. They would have carried their advanced agricultural knowledge with them. This suggests that the Neolithic revolution didn't arise independently in multiple locations, as the orthodox theory states. Instead, it may have been spread by the traumatized survivors of the Black Sea flood. This would make them another branch of the same global, interconnected civilization we've been tracing. The academic establishment, particularly in archaeology, has a deep-seated aversion to catastrophe as an agent of historical change. It's too messy, too unpredictable. It disrupts their neat timelines and tidy theories of cultural evolution. They prefer slow, gradual processes that they can model and control. A giant world-altering flood is a narrative they cannot accommodate, and so they choose to ignore it. But the evidence remains, locked away in the anoxic, oxygen-free depths of the Black Sea. A perfectly preserved, drowned world is waiting there. A world of towns, villages, and people who were the ancestors of modern Europe and the Middle East. Their story is one of the most important stories in human history, and it has been deliberately silenced. It is a story of a paradise lost, a testament to the terrifying power of nature, and a powerful reminder of how fragile civilization truly is. The mysteries of our past continue to inspire and challenge us, and here at Planet Pulse, we're dedicated to exploring them with you. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the lost world of Gobekli Tepe and beyond. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Planet Pulse for more deep dives into the mysteries of ancient civilizations. We have exciting new episodes coming soon, where we'll uncover more secrets from humanity's distant past. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and stay curious with Planet Pulse.